Our next presenter is Matt Dutke, Chief Operating Officer for Independence Group. Doesn't need a lot of introduction. Matt joined IGO in 2014 and has been the Chief Operating Officer since 2018. He has enormous experience in all facets of the industry, exploration, resource development projects. He has held senior management positions within PMI Gold, Goldfields, and WMC Resources as well. Has extensive global experience working in Australia, South Africa, Asia, and South America. Please welcome Matt.
Thank you, Natalia. Yeah, I started my career in nickel and Kambalda a long time ago, so another Western mining colleague. Also, I'd like to thank PayDirt for hosting this conference again. It's great to see the sector to come together and the support we get from the sector. As part of this presentation, I'll talk to three key themes. I'll talk to our market, give a little bit of perception of our market from our side, talk to our journey as a company and where we've gone, and then I'll focus on the nickel operations as we move forward. So again, this is our perception of where the market's going from an IGO point of view. It's clear, one of the greatest challenges we face as society is global warming, climate change, and the loss of diversity. The graph on the right here shows global emissions. Since 2020, we've pumped around about 40 gigatons of carbon CO2 into the atmosphere. Last year alone, we pumped about 1.1 trillion tonnes last year into the atmosphere. Climate, we're sitting about 1.1 degrees since pre-industrial levels. And ultimately, to get to carbon neutral, we need to be carbon neutral by 2050. Effectively, that also means that reducing our emissions by about 45% by 2030. It's a huge challenge. There's estimates of the capital investment required to actually get there. And there's talks about between US 60 trillion to about $200 trillion worth of investments to actually get to a scenario of 1.5. We all know electrification of transport is part of that solution to get to a net zero. Transportation takes about 1/4 of the CO2 emissions globally. So as part of that solution is the electrification of transportation. The graph on the left shows EV penetration rates. It's forecast to be about 30% CAGR from 2021 to 2025. Last year alone, from 2020 to 2021, it doubled to about 8.6 million units of EVs. Looking at a 1.5 scenario, by 2030, we're looking at around about 72 million units of EVs needing to come into the market if we're going to meet that 1.5 net zero emissions target. What that links to is obviously to lithium-ion batteries. The clear understanding is there's no alternative to lithium-ion batteries when we're talking about the electrification of mobilisation. What also is clear in terms of battery and battery chemistry is that nickel-dominant batteries will still be the preference, estimated to be around about 70 to 75% of the lithium-ion batteries will be made up of nickel-dominant NCM batteries. That's coupled to huge requirements in raw materials. There's no doubt. We're looking 2022 to 2030 about a growth of 4 times nickel, 6 times lithium, about 4 times copper. Looking at the supply and demand balance for nickel, it's tight. We understand that there's, in the short term, additional supply will come out of Indonesia, and that supply will start to chew up the EV growth we'll start to see new demand required from about 2026 and the market going into deficit around then when we see the pickups of EV demand. We also see bifurcation, in Class 1, as we see the battery sector continuing to grow and optimise the battery chain. The importance of Class 1 versus the MPI will become more and more important as that sector continues to grow. Estimated around about 2.8 million tonnes of nickel is needed of new resources to meet a 2050 net zero scenario. Talk a little bit about our journey as a company and where we're going. As a company, we're a purpose-led company, and our purpose is really about making a difference. Our winning aspiration is to be globally relevant supplier of products that are critical for clean energy metals. We'll do that by producing a diverse suite of products. We'll also do that by being vertically integrated and connected to our customer and optimising our chain to the battery sector. We're also committed to being carbon neutral. But ultimately, our key driver is really our people. Our people are the core drivers of how we will be successful in an organisation. IGO, ASX listed, sits about a market cap of about $11 billion and continuing to grow. Focused on mining and downstream, connecting the two. We're currently producing nickel, lithium, copper and cobalt, ultimately linked to electrification and transport, renewable energy storage and renewable energy generation. Our story, we started shifting the business 7 years ago. So 7 years ago, we recognised society needed to change in terms of decoupling from fossil fuels. We recognised that the demand that would be created, we didn't know when, the demand of what would be created through critical minerals. And ultimately, we knew that we wanted to be part of it. As part of that journey, we shifted ourselves from being a diversified miner to be 100% aligned to clean energy metals. A key part of that journey has been the acquisition and the investment to form a global joint venture with Tianqi Lithium, which we closed mid-last year. It's about a $1.8 billion investment, and I'll talk a little bit about that. Also about divestment of our 30% interest in Tropicana mine, and more recently, the acquisition of Western Areas as we looked at strengthening our nickel business within our portfolio. As an asset suite, fantastic asset suite, mostly here in Western Australia, production of lithium, nickel, copper and cobalt. Got a number of projects in development in the lithium and nickel side, multiple studies looking at how we continue to grow, and ultimately exploration, which is really our growth vehicle for us, continuing. For 2023, expected to spend around about $75 million on exploration per annum. We have about 64,000 square kilometres of tenure. Just jump to a little bit of focus on some of our nickel operations. With the Western Areas acquisition, we currently have 2 producing assets. The Nova mine, Australia's lowest cost nickel mine, and also Forrestania mine, which has consistently been producing for multiple years now. The project in development is Cosmos, and I'll talk a little bit about Cosmos. And ultimately, we're looking at how we can take our nickel business and become vertically integrated and take that downstream. And that's one of the drivers with Western Areas for us is that nickel metal units to actually provide enough feed for downstream. Nova, lowest cost nickel operation in Australia. FY22, we did 26,600 tonnes of nickel, 11,500 tonnes of copper at a C1 cost of about $1.95. Underlying free cash flow from that asset for FY22 was $574 million. Free cash flow margin was 64%. FY23 forecast to do around about the 24,000 to 27,000 tonnes of nickel, 11,000 tonnes of copper. C1 cost about $2.60 to $3. Key strategic project for Nova is about how we continue to drive costs and keep costs stable in this inflationary environment. Last year alone, we managed to pull out $5 million of operating costs out of the business through implementing technology, improving productivities and a focus on efficiencies. Looking to replicate that again this year. Forestania come into the portfolio at the end of the financial year. FY 2022 produced 14,000 tonnes of nickel. Up on site yesterday, teams enthused, and we like the potential that we see at Forestania. Focused on optimising mine and processing activities. One of the advantages that we have as a consolidated group is really about leveraging our ability to leverage some of the offtake abilities, to leverage some operational synergies that we couldn't do, but the 3 assets in the portfolio enables us to do that. And also undertaking a systematic review of exploration potential and additional nickel and lithium on that Forestania belt. Cosmos, at the end of the quarter, will come out with a optimised plan for Cosmos. What that's looking at doing is essentially expanding mill capacity from that 750-900 million tonnes per annum to about 1.1 million tonnes per annum. We're also looking at doing is changing mine plans, looking at acceleration of some additional resources underground with AM5 and AM6 and bringing that into the production profile earlier and coupled with Odysseus. And also getting the timing of the project to match the timing of the completion of the shaft, the idea of hauling. So we're wanting to try and get that timing right so the project is actually complete with shaft completion. Another key project, strategic project for in the Cosmos is the study on Mount Good that we also see as part of a feed solution for our downstream processing. This chart here just shows the battery supply chain, and what we're trying to do as a business is really integrate ourselves into this battery supply chain. Now we do that on the lithium side. We do that in terms of the production right through to a lithium battery grade lithium hydroxide, and we're looking at replicating that on the nickel side. So in partnership with Wyloo, we're looking at downstream feasibility study on the nickel. And we have a view, and I'll talk about that view, about how we get from straight from mine right through to precursor. And ultimately that's fed by multiple mines. Now we've got the feed solution about multiple mines coming out of here in Western Australia. That process we've been working, when we talked about our strategy change 7 years ago, one of those strategy change was to actually understand the market and say, well, if you had a clean sheet of paper, what would you do different? And part of that was to look at how you take nickel metal units and process them, get the recoveries, and get into battery grade specifications. And that's the development of the IGO process, which essentially is a hydromet process using direct crystallisation as a mechanism to ensure purities. View is that once you have metal in solution, then you actually potentially better just go straight to a precursor rather than continuation go to these intermediate products. The further you can get further downstream as one refinery, the more cost savings you'll drive and productivities you'll drive. In the process of doing a feasibility study with Wyloo, with the idea to reach a investment decision around about mid-2024. Our other component to our business is obviously decarbonisation, fundamental to us and important to us. Our first solar farm at Nova was constructed in 2019, well and truly before most. In the process of finalising our second solar farm at Nova, which will take our total capacity up to 16 meg with a 10 meg battery. Be one of the first mines come December where we'll be turning off all of our generators and running 100% renewable for about 9 hours a day during the summer and autumn months, which is a great achievement. Already we've reduced our emissions by about 30-35% at Nova. We adopt an internal carbon price. We charge ourselves $60 a tonne, and that funding is available for us to continue to invest in decarbonisation invested last year about $3 million, looking around about that fund will generate this year with about $7 million as we continue to look at decarbonisation for us as a business. A little bit on the lithium side of the business, 25% interest in Greenbushes mine, fantastic mine, 20 years life of mine. We have a 49% interest in the lithium hydroxide facility producing lithium hydroxide, and again that integrated business into the battery supply chain that we're looking at replicating in the nickel side. So in summary, as a company, we're well positioned to leverage off this, what we see as this disruptive transition to clean energy metals as we shift away from fossil fuels. Lithium batteries and energy storage is part of that solution. There's no doubt about that. Supply, we understand that there is a huge amount of pressure on raw materials, and probably one of the constraints to this growth story is actually supply of those raw materials. Supply chains are dynamic and changing. They haven't been optimised. They haven't really been, because it's such an evolving space, we'll continue to see those supply chains being optimised. And then ultimately, as a company, we're making a difference as we accelerate towards a clean energy future. Thank you.